Hello, welcome back to Only Pistols. Today we're having a look at a Feinwerkbau 90. This is a single shot, spring pad, recoilless, electronic trigger 177 target pistol. Let's start by looking at the markings on it. And apologies in advance for pronunciation. So at the front there you've got the Feinwerkbau logo, Feinwerkbau and ARFA registered, and then Westinger and Altenburger for the production site Obendorf, and that marking there, D7238. The model 90 and caliber 4.5177, the low pressure mark, and made in Germany and patented. Nothing on this side, and on the underside of the frame casting you've got the serial number. So let's start with the sight. So the rear sight is pretty typical for this period of Feinwerkbau. It's adjustable for width for the gap by just putting a pin in that hole there and just rotating that. So it's pretty infinitely variable, and a very good, very wide rear sight. Slightly shallow maybe, but very usable. The adjustments there are marked on, so this is the elevation, and that's the knob for windage, and they are click adjustable, so no need for tools. The foresight is typical for this age of Feinwerkbau, so you've got an interchangeable flat blade there, and that just sits into the muzzle end there, and to take it out and adjust it you've got that little screw on the end which you take out, and then the blades just slip out. There were a total of 8 different blade sizes, so depending on how you wanted to see the target in relation to the sights, you could really kind of fine-tune this. Very, very good. Otherwise, nicely crowned muzzle, nice round muzzle there. The end of the barrel here, the type that holds the sight, is an aluminium casting, and that's just pinned in place with that cross pin underneath to hold it. The construction of the barrel is steel, so it's a rifled steel barrel. And then when you get to the main part of the pistol, the loading lever is steel, but then the cover is cast aluminium, the frame is cast aluminium, and that frame comes down in to make the surround inside for the grip housing. The grip itself is a 2-part grip with a palm shelf which is adjustable. The grip itself is not adjustable, so because you've got the electronics, or some of the electronics for the electronic trigger in here, housed in here, it's fixed. So on the bottom you've got a screw to hold the electronics in place in here. You've also got a diode. On this one the diode's packed up. So the electronic trigger, it's very reminiscent of the layout of the original of the other triggers, but this is a system that is permanently on. So with a live battery in there, there's no on-off switch. The trigger is there permanently live. And one critical thing to do if I've got one of these, before you attempt to cock it, is to make sure that the trigger is operating. Because if you haven't got an operational trigger, when you cock it, you can't have any. You've got no way of releasing the pressure, so you'll have a compressed spring. So to check it, it's quite simply a case of listening for a click. To check that it's actually firing the solenoid, it's also fairly easy. We'll just try and get that in to see if you can see it. So with it held vertical, if you operate the trigger, you actually see the action come down. I'll just do that again. So to show that the solenoid is actually working, and that just tells you that the solenoid is firing. So about the electrics, in the stock you've got the battery and the electronics to control it, and then in under here, under this cover, you've got the spring that holds the action down, in common with the 65 and 80. And then this bolt here is where the solenoid sits. So when you pull the trigger, the solenoid fires and nudges the lever that releases the sear. The trigger is adjustable for reach on the bar. Let's just undo that screw. You can also alter the angle that the trigger blade sits at, and you can also invert that, so you can turn it from one way up to the other depending on how your finger reaches the trigger. Adjustment wise, you can adjust the reach of the trigger with this, so you can adjust the first stage here, and you can adjust some part of the weight, the let off weight, with this screw here. In theory, if you screw that in, you should be increasing the weight of the trigger. With this one, it is not 500, it won't meet 500 grams, and which is the minimum there. The only way really then to get around that would be to change the spring. So you can quite see it in here, but there's a spring that sits in there, and that spring, let me just get my finger onto it. When you pull the trigger back, that spring is what is being stretched. So probably what I need to do if I want to get this one over 500 grams would be to get a heavier spring to put it in there. So not a problem. The trigger works, but it's lighter than if you were going to take it for competition. Other things about this, well, the top cover on the earlier Feinwerkbau 65 and 80, this was a rounded profile to the top cover for the action, and with the 90 that's now squared off and far more angular look to it. You've still got the serrations on the top to damp down any glare from the surface, and you've basically then got a paint finish on all the aluminium pieces. So the muzzle end, the top cover and the frame are all paint finished, and then you've just got your hardwood grips with an oil finish. So loading it is exactly the same as the 65 and 80. Just push that lever in to release the cocking lever, and then as you pull that back you can hear the bear trap engaging, so that's just holding the piston. And with that back you can see the blue seal that goes up against the end of the barrel and the breech, and then you can see inside there you can just see the white buffer. Now that's a buffer on the end of the piston, not the piston seal, and quite often you'll find when those break down you'll start getting little bits of white plastic coming out. The piston seal itself is still a phosphor bronze metal ring, so very long lasting. Don't try and take them off. If you take it apart you'll generally split them because they get work hardened, but they do last for virtually ever. On the bottom there you've got another buffer, and that buffer engages with this here, and that lever there is what engages. So when you close that, that pushes that forwards, and that then engages the trigger mechanism. So you loaded it. Quite simply put a pellet in the end of the breech directly into the rifling, close that up, and in closing that what you're doing, this is one of the parts of this pistol that's so clever. This is actually your cylinder. So when you pull the lever back, the cylinder is pulling back the cylinder itself, but also the piston. And when it gets to the full travel, that then latches the piston onto the trigger sear at this end. So when you bring the lever forwards again, you're actually moving the cylinder forwards. And so that's now latched over. And when you fire it, take up the first stage, and you can see the action moving backwards. So when you've got that, when that's fired, so we'll just have a quick look, but there's a little bit more room to go on that. And then to reset it, it just comes forwards, and that's now locked again. So is this truly recoilless? No, it is a recoiling pistol, but it's got the sledge system is what absorbs the recoil. So let's just cock that again, go through it again. So bear trap, add the pellet into the end of the barrel, close it over, and that's just the first stage is there, was just against the spring weight, and the second stage is just where you're touching the micro switch. And then you can just see that move backwards. So that's just sliding on 4 pins. So you've got 4 pins in the pistol in the top action here, 2 at the front, 2 at the back, which you can't see, and then you've basically got 2 bridges that stick up from the bottom of the action, and they have the 4 holes in them, and the action is literally just sliding on those. So there's no springs or anything else involved in this. It's purely and simply the weight of the top of the pistol just running back when you fire it. So as you fire it, it's releasing the lock that holds it forwards, and it just enables the pistol top to go backwards. So this was the final design of what started out as the Feinwerkbau 1965, and this was produced from, as I said, 1982 to 97. So there were 20,000 units made, or that's the records that Feinwerkbau have got. So by this stage, this was competing against CO2 and the early HPAs, high pressure air pistols. So it was really the last gasp of the spring power pistols, but it had been a really good run for this design. It's a lovely weapon to use, a lovely pistol to use. It's very accurate, the trigger is very good, and the sights are nice to use. Because of the novel design of the piston, you've got quite a short action and quite a long barrel. Because it's side lever, the barrel's fixed, it's inherently very accurate. So accuracy, yeah, there you go. It's pretty accurate. Yeah, I could do with moving the sights down probably 5 notches, but if I did, that would have been 3 10s, 2 9s, so more than adequate. As with a lot of my pistols, I'm afraid I don't do that much practice, but it's good enough even for me just picking it up. And that just shows you, that's the other thing, this is first card I shot, don't adjust it. It's inherently easy to use. The other thing about it, well, it's quite heavy by the modern comparison. This pistol is basically 3 pounds or 1.35 kilos, and that's quite a lot. Feinwerkbau thought that people might like to have it heavier, so they actually produced weights that would sit on top of the barrel, so you could sit them on and then lock them in to add a bit more weight to the front. Yeah, it's quite a chunky pistol. And certainly, if you're doing a full match with this, you want to be you want to have done a lot of practice and be pretty fit. I suppose in earlier days they were just tougher than us. We got a bit used to having light pistols, but hey, that's what it is. So there you go, the Feinwerkbau 90, a super pistol, the end of the spring era really, but the design had a good run from the Feinwerkbau 65, and still really usable if you can get one. Like I said, just a warning, if you do pick one up, before you try and cock it, check that solenoid is working. The electronics are not really replaceable. They are a repair job, so you'd need to find someone, and if they're not working, you will need to find someone who can repair them for you. Don't oil them, keep them clean. The batteries are available through eBay and Amazon, so they do last quite a long time, but it's always worth having a spare in the box. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have, then please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon, do all the usual YouTubey stuff. And otherwise, I'll see you again soon with another pistol. Thanks so much.